Welcome to Automates, the podcast that brings you musings from thought leaders and industry pioneers who are shaping the way we work, think, and succeed. Each episode is packed with insights, expert interviews, and practical tips that will inspire and empower you to take your business to the next level. So tune in, subscribe, and get ready to innovate with Automates. Hello, Matt. How are you? Sorry, I just
Doing
got
well.
you.
Happy New Year.
As you're drinking. I've got you as you're drinking. Apologies.
No, I'll probably drink throughout. I got to keep the instrument loose here with water.
So how you doing? You well?
Yeah, all good. Year ended well. Year has started well for us. How about yourself?
Yeah, very good, mate. Very good. Very good indeed. Thank you for joining our little podcast. I'm really interested to get your sort of thoughts on what we're going to chat through today, because I think the one thing that this podcast is it's a collection of industry people that I know that, I bring slightly different, unique opinions around things, and sort of your journey is really interesting. When we caught up sort of towards the middle of last year and chatted through some of the stuff, there's a lot of what you were saying resonated with like my background, but actually it's really interesting to see where Litera are going around sort of your function and your role. I know you've got a new role, a new job title that is there, so we can introduce that. So yeah, why don't you introduce yourself, let people know who you are, and then we can dig right in.
Sure. Yeah, Matt Miller, currently VP of the Value and Innovation team here at Litera. I've been with Litera. It will be 18 years in March of this year. You mentioned it's kind of a unique journey. I don't have a pure background in any one discipline here at Litera. I started my journey at a company called Microsystems 30 plus years ago. Microsystems, essentially the little snowball that started the bigger snowball that is what we know as Litera in the legal industry today. I started in customer success. That was a role similar as it is today, and that we're trying to help customers understand the value in the applications and renew at the end of their 3-year subscription-based licensing that we still maintain today. I did that for a year or two. Then I moved into pro services. At that point in time, we only had one product to worry about from a professional services perspective. If you know the application DocX Tools, that was kind of the product I came up on. We were starting to build out other applications, but that's the core. That's kind of where my core knowledge sits. So I do know Microsoft Word really well. Our users at the time were heavily support staff. And I worked in pro services as an individual contributor and helped run those teams for quite some time. And then product management was starting to become a thing. And when I was in pro services, it was kind of like I was always getting feedback from customers. Can the application do this? Can it do that? Could we potentially adjust it for the lawyer persona? And I would work with engineering quite a bit to provide that voice of customer information, and then see, is it possible to get this stuff on the roadmap? As a result of that kind of just natural conversations I was having with engineering, the then executive team asked me to come over to product management. That was kind of an emerging discipline for us. And then I was in product management as an individual contributor, and then kind of a leader of teams for over about a decade. And then my most recent stint here at Litera is kind of a transition over to more of the revenue side, where the value and innovation team is kind of a bridge between product, revenue, and the customer. Does podcasts like this, speaks at ILTA engagements and other types of things.
So they roll you out when they want somebody to do some dancing and stuff like that.
Exactly. The funny thing is I will admittedly say I'm a absolute introvert, but the amount of times people see me on stage and on podcasts, you'd be like, that's quite surprising. But yes, they do roll me out, but I kind of have been beaten into that role over many, many years.
Yeah, but it's really interesting. So you talked about a couple of things in terms of the journey that you've been on, and it's not too dissimilar to my journey as well. So I did 10 years in a law firm whilst you were doing Microsystems, and I then joined HiQ. I sort of spent time inside of customer success, leading customer success, inside of professional services, consulting, bit of product. Then my last role within sort of the TR world, post-acquisition, was in the role that you're in, which was called slightly different, but it was sort of aligned with product, but it was a bit of customer success, a bit of quite insight into sales. So it's really the journey and everything else is really interesting. I think one of the things that sort of sticks out is, I mean, if you've been in this world for a long time, as
Yeah.
sort of I have, you've seen the ebbs and flows of everything, but you've also been in that that small sort of startup scale up world,
Yeah.
now being inside of Litera, where you've got sort of bigger things and sort of like multi products and various other bits and pieces. Talk to me about sort of some of the that journey that you've gone through, and sort of that discovery of sort of where do you find yourself sort of working best? Where do you find yourself sort of in that kind of experience? So the big, small, the big bit. I mean, the small bit to the big bit. You know.
Yeah, as companies get bigger and bigger, I think one of the main things that is natural to occur is, just additional processes. And I think for me over my time here, that's kind of been the biggest adjustment is you just have more people to work with, more people to bring up to speed, and you do need to write things down more. You do need to create process to bring other people up to speed. If I look back at my days at Microsystems when I was in product management, I used to sit next to the engineers that that were building the one product we were essentially working on at that point in time.
Yeah.
And I could just, after I got off a customer call, I could just turn to them and be like, hey, I just got off like 2, 3 customer calls. It seems like this is something that could be valuable in the application. They'd be like, I'll have it done by lunch. They just knock it out. I didn't necessarily, we didn't necessarily have a pure process around putting in user stories. And we had, very strict release dates from a product management perspective. We hit dates and we were selling well and all of these types of things. But when it was just a smaller group of product managers, we didn't have necessarily boards that you had to report to and get sign off on for roadmap approval and those types of things. You
Yeah.
could just be a bit more agile and, I guess, slightly more innovative at a quicker speed in the startup world. As you start to scale and add more products, you do need a kind of more rigorous process around, especially when M&A becomes a component of all of this.
Yeah.
As you bring these companies on, you can't have everybody running product management and customer discovery different ways. It makes things quite challenging for the business to come up to speed, as well as the customer base to consume the different technology. So process just becomes a bigger component of it. I like to think we're agile here. We do pivot relatively quickly for the size we are, but it is definitely harder to create something hyper innovative without people saying, prove it first, right? That's going to cost a lot of time and
Yeah.
money if we go down that particular route. How can you first prove that that's going to be successful? And you'll find yourself essentially building business cases in PowerPoints and having long conversations about why we might want to build something that has probably no data set to support the pros or cons to it yet, because it's so innovative. But what we're kind of striking a balance with now is we don't always have to have a data set now that proves that, yes, we're going to make millions of dollars off of it, or no, we're not. It's kind of, let's build some type of proof of concept, kind of put it in a beta program with a core set of customers. Does this problem we're looking to solve resonate with them? And we're a bit more mature around that type of process as we've gotten bigger, so that innovation can kind of continue to stay at the forefront of Litera while we continue to grow and grow and grow.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's naturally, it was the big thing that I really struggled with, moving from the high Q world. Although we weren't small when high Q was acquired by TR, but transitioning into TR,
Mm.
where I needed
Yeah.
permission to go and make a cup of tea, kind of thing. Obviously, I don't drink tea, so that's not a real scenario.
Yeah,
Before
yeah,
TR sends me sort of cease and desist letters or anything else. But
yeah.
but it was that transition of, you have an idea, you canvas that idea around 3 or 4 people, and then you could be thinking about how that idea is going to impact you this quarter or this month, as opposed to what it might be in 6 months or 9 months or whatever it might be. And that was the thing that really struggled. But I think one of the things, and I don't know if you have this same kind of mentality or sort of concept, but I always struck the idea that actually for large organizations like Litera and TR, you almost want mini scale ups inside of the big beast. You want sort of,
Yeah.
okay, well, we need to do things in a semi professional kind of way. We need to
Yeah.
have the right kind of processes for who we are and what we're trying to do. We need to be cognizant of the other sort of tracks that are running in tangent to avoid sort of client confusion and various other bits and pieces. But actually, this little unit can go off and do this, and this little unit can go off and do that, and you can be innovative inside of that unit. And I think from what you were
Mm.
saying, and I'd love to dig into it a bit more, but the value and innovation team that you're now part of feels like that kind of the tip of the spear of, okay, client conversation, innovation around what you could be doing next, what the customers are thinking about, what are they asking a company like Litera to be thinking about, and sort of you've got you're having those really interesting levels of conversations, I guess.
Yeah, and you know what? That for our team, it our customers are both the sales organization as well as our customer base. And what we have done at Litera is I wouldn't say it's pure skunk works, but we do have a team of engineers that are more innovation focused,
Mhm.
and you can bring them ideas. And they generally have resources that have certain capacity to help flesh out innovative ideas.
Yeah.
Um, one of the ones recently the value and innovation team was working on was actually an application to help internally. We have an ebbing and flowing sales team. We have a growing sales team. We acquire a lot of new products relatively quickly, and it's tough to come up to speed on what are those applications, what can they do, just even basic questions about those applications. If you're talking with a customer, what type of discovery questions should you be asking? Those types of things, just sales preparedness type capabilities. We could see this, the team, myself and the team could see this struggle for the sales team. And typically, what are they going to do? They just send Teams messages to certain individuals that they've met, and hopefully they'll have the right answer. And if not, they'll pass you on to the next person. But with the kind of Microsoft and as well as other companies are pushing very hard on this concept of agents. They're essentially, Microsoft was calling these Copilot plugins previously. Now they're calling them autonomous agents. But the ability to just ask any natural language question to something in your team's environment or within the Microsoft ecosystem and get a very precise answer back. That we're building it right now. We've currently just calling it our bot for revenue bot, and it essentially will answer any product related question. Very specific, not every question. They don't necessarily need to know the installation requirements for Metadact, but can Metadact clean header footer content? That's something that they might get on a call with a customer.
Yeah.
And instead of not being able to answer it in real time, our bot is trained on that type of information. But also if if a prospect outlines pain points that they might need a solution for, our bot would recommend these are particular Litera products that might be of value, or maybe you need to talk to them about Metadact. What types of discovery questions to help better qualify that lead from a sales perspective can you ask? And our bot is trained on those types of discovery questions. So there's something what I would say is like a bit more innovative, and I do think what we'll see is all disciplines across internally and externally within these organizations using these kind of autonomous agents to be more efficient and come up to speed on things more quickly.
Yeah.
That's an example of that. We see that with our customer base as well, quite a bit.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, I think that's sort of what we've done. We've done 15 minutes almost, and we've not really talked about AI, which is
It has to
it's
come and
not
play at some point.
it's not the longest for one of my podcasts, but it's definitely not the shortest. So you sort of we go through, and I think it's really interesting to look at, and I sort of chat to law firms all the time, and their progressive use of their own environment as opposed to
Mm.
being other vendors. I mean, they're obviously using Microsoft or something like that, but
Yeah.
I'm talking about they're not going off and buying a product from Litera or TR or Autologics. They're using their own in-house skills. Their tech, and it's interesting to look at this sort of this wave. And I know we were going to talk about trends and everything else, but maybe sort of to talk to this point very specifically. Are you talked about it earlier, sort of back in the day, you talked to sort of business professionals who were using the older technologies, the older platforms to do word related stuff and everything else. And now you're talking to innovation teams driving that kind of thing. Are you seeing a rise in more technologically savvy
Mm.
clients inside of legal, where historically they might outsource it to another provider or whatever it might be? That change has been really pronounced, and I think that there's a massive trend around that, and I don't think, and this is calling, it's not calling anyone out, but it's, I don't think we as a vendor community are quite ready for that true builder kind of engineer kind of world, because we sell products and products get
Mm.
installed and they get maintained, but they don't. I think that the sort of the rise of the old low code no code sort of scenario 5 6 years ago, that I think is going to come back. Not branded low code, no code, but I think people plugging and playing different technologies, because the advances in the skills inside of law firms is changed. It's gone up a gear. Have you seen the same kind of scenario with your engagements?
Look, I think when I was at Microsystems, if I go back to that again, the persona, the key user for us was the word processing help desk, and the typical lawyer at that point in time didn't he or she did not grow up with technology and and apps and very fluid interfaces and very user friendly technologies. That just not what they had. Now, I think what we see now at law firms are that core associate and lawyer at that law firm did grow up with technology. They do have high expectations of easy to use, the ability to use it from anywhere on any device. Rapid innovation is core in their mindset for those technologies, and legal vendors need to change. If you've been doing the same thing for the last 20 years with your legal tech, it's probably decaying. It needs to be reimagined, especially with this new whole field of generative AI and LLMs and all of
Yeah,
these types of things. Absolutely, I think what we're seeing more and more is that user base not only growing up with technology, but wanting to be involved with all the different technology from that particular vendor. Whereas previously our cleanup capabilities would have just gone to a word processing team. Now some of the associates want to be able to do some of their own basic cleanup. So we need to kind of reimagine. They don't necessarily, that individual might not have the word expertise that support staff individual. So how do we create the application to keep them out of trouble, but also allow them to clean their own document after hours? We'll be moving our drafting stack of technologies, kind of what Litera is probably most known for. That whole stack of applications is moving to the new universal office add-in model from Microsoft. This essentially just means it's a fully SaaS-based application set. You can use it from anywhere on any device, and the interface super intuitive and is identical across a PC, Mac, iPad, Word Online. I think that's the type of stuff that our customer base really is super interested in.
yeah,
And then from a plug and play perspective, Microsoft is pushing out some very intuitive services that allow you to build some pretty interesting stuff on your own, should you have the wherewithal and development resources. And how Microsoft Copilot Studio is a perfect example of that. That agent I was talking about, our RBot agent, is essentially built on top of Microsoft Copilot Studio. There's not a lot of coding. Like if you actually get into Copilot Studio, it's largely a natural language conversation. You're creating prompts essentially and giving it guidance on what you'd want it to do, to put some guardrails around it. But there's not necessarily lines of code you have to write. You need people who are good thinkers of solutions,
yeah.
and can think through problems really well.
So that's a very, it's interesting. You're saying stuff and you're talking about Copilot Studio. You could have been talking about Autologics, quite frankly, because
Mm.
you don't need to have somebody that knows code. I mean, there are parts of our system, if you're writing scripts and stuff, obviously you need to understand what they're going to do and everything else. But actually, the majority of the interface is drag and drop and it's easy to use. But you touched on something really interesting. You sort of, you don't need to be a developer, but you need to think. I think you need to think like a developer. You need to have
Mm.
that logic mindset, that
Yep.
foundational view of, okay, particularly for our technology where you're building sort of end-to-end processes, you need to understand, okay, well, what data do I have? What data do I need that data to look like? And what are the outputs from those different parts? So that then I can sort of layer across the process sort of
Yeah.
engine that sits around it. And so there is a logic, there's a logical way of mapping that out, especially when you're thinking about relational data models and stuff like that. I mean, you and I, we could sit there with an idea for a solution. We could break it down, and we'd probably have different relational data models and a different process to. We might achieve the same thing, but yours might be more efficient than mine, or mine might be too convoluted. You know, mine would be rubbish, quite frankly, and yours would be pretty good. But that's the kind of they're the kind of uh, thinking kind of people that I'm seeing law firms sort of recruit and hire. They can apply their background, they can understand sort of the business challenge, but then there's a sort of a technical knowledge slash understanding slash, I don't know, that goes in with it, because data is really important. You were talking about LLMs. Good data, I mean, law firms are awash with good data. It's just not particularly structured. I know you've got a bunch of products that sort of fix that and sort that, Foundation and Dragon and the like. But I think what's really interesting is that LLMs are, and the rise of generative AI and the application thereof, people are now suddenly realizing how much of a challenge it is to understand what data you've got and how to best leverage it for customer insights or to drive better business decisions or whatever it might be. And I think that's helping everyone. So in our world, that's helping us because people are already thinking about it as they come to us, as opposed to before. It might be we need to fix a process, but we
Yeah.
have no idea what we need to do it. So I think that's changing massively. I think at the moment. So
Couldn't agree more. I mean, look, I think data is data is the gold right now, but understanding what data to use is never harder than it is right now. If I go back to my internal example there, I could probably have that bot built and deployed in 2 days. The hardest part is understanding what questions the sales team needs answered. Because then I don't want to just dump every set of documentation in a SharePoint repository and have it learn on that. We want a very curated response,
yeah,
Q&A experience. And so I have about 40 beta testers in that program right now. And it's been over 48 hours and they've only given me 3 questions to date. So to your point, it's even yet they're super excited about the possibilities of these agents, and everybody is, but it takes time to kind of understand what questions you want answered. I can go get the data, I know exactly where the data is, but I need to know what question you want answered. And I think that's a challenge because we sit on so much data.
yeah,
Tuning it down to the most valuable, really, I always look at it as knowledge versus wisdom. We got a lot of knowledge here, but we don't, that's not good enough. We really want to put the wisdom, those little nuggets, in the hands of the users. And if you just overload it on data, the result sets back of the technology aren't that good. Whereas the technology might have been, the thing slowing us down previously. It's not. It's the data that's kind of powering the technology that takes a bit of time.
yeah, definitely. I think it's really interesting. I think if you look at sort of the last sort of the post COVID coming into sort of this Gen AI world that we're in, I think the industry flirted with data and AI back in the Kira days before
Mm,
Kira was part of Litera, and there's a
yeah.
whole bunch of other technologies out there that sort of flirted with it. But I think it's understanding the value of that beyond that one action. So the modality of going, I want this contract and I want to extract these 20 deal points, and you go, okay, that's great, that's valuable. I want to do that for 100 contracts for a particular process. That's great. But actually, that is one function in a wider end to end process that you need to know the inputs and outputs to then drive what exactly you want to do with that to make it scalable and make it
Yeah.
valuable and sort of, to your point, sort of drive that wisdom as opposed to knowledge or just the data itself. So no, it's we're in for an interesting couple of years. It's going to be really exciting in terms of how people are transitioning. the types of tools people are looking and building internally, but the things that are client facing for us vendors, it's, I don't know, it almost, and I'm going to say something which sort of I've joked before about, but if you haven't got AI in your name, or if it isn't on the first page of your website, then you're
Yeah.
not going to sell anything because everyone's only buying AI stuff. Now that's not true, but it definitely feels like that. There's a tangible feeling of that sort of AI sucking all of the dollars from all of the law firms at the moment. And what does that look like? And how do you sort of survive? And what does that look? It's really interesting. It forces sort of the big firms to take notice and sort of drive things forward. It forces the little ones, driving a whole bunch of new startups coming through for you to buy at some point. You know, yes. But it's interesting, isn't it? Sort of, I think the next 2 or 3 years are going to be really, really challenging but interesting sort of view
Yeah.
of how technology drives things forward.
Yeah, I mean, the 2024 Ilta Tech surveys came out in October of last year, and it was, there's new questions in there about generative AI and purchasing around these types of applications, and it pretty much is like 80-90% of all respondents to that survey said they were going to make a generative AI purchase in the next 12 months. So yes, and law firms we talk to are increasing their budgets to include a couple new $1 million worth of spend in this particular space. I think you have to. I think if you're not looking at generative capabilities and how it can make you more proficient and efficient, you will fall behind. Not just the vendors, but also the law firms themselves. What I think you'll see is that no one's going to sign a 3-year contract, or most firms are going to sign 5 and 7-year contract. This stuff, there's like 1,000 new generative AI applications that have come out in the last 12 months. Most folks are going to wait and see where all that lands. There's going to be a couple big players in the space, and those ones, okay, once we establish who those are going to be, you'll start to see them lock people into multi-year contracts. But right now, there's a couple vendors doing some really interesting things. We see companies signing on for 1, maybe 2-year contracts to see if the value is truly there from what the
Yeah,
marketing materials say. And then, things will evolve from there. But it will be,
yeah. That's
2025 will be a big year for it.
yeah. It's the question. So I've got we've had conversations where we're not an AI provider, though we have some capability within the platform. But you look at we've got people who have signed with us in the last 6 months who really challenge the concept of a 3-year deal because they aren't signing 3-year deals for anything anymore
Yeah.
because they are so used to the fact that actually, why would we lock ourselves in when everything is changing so rapidly? Why would we sign with Autologics or I don't know, another AI provider or B another provider, whatever it might be,
Yeah.
when things are moving at such a rapid pace, and it's sort of, I think again, it creates that next sort of layer of, okay, well, product market fit, okay, you're closing deals, so that's fine, but
Yep.
actually the customer success side of things, our kind of things,
Mm.
has to be absolutely bang on. Has to be
Yep.
bang on to maintain that revenue because leaders in the tech world, they'll sit there. They're judged on ARR and they're judged on their churn rates. And if they're churning through a whole bunch of stuff because another competitor's come through and this and this and this, that's going to cause big problems and valuations and all sorts of other stuff. It's that's what I'm saying. It's going to impact all aspects of the market. It's going to be really
For sure. And I think what we'll see, and at least I saw in 2024, is generative AI kind of falling into 2 buckets from a technology perspective. One, it was a value add to a product that already had good market fit. Kira would potentially be a good example of that. Kira's been around over a decade. It's got good ARR, it's got good GRR. We added to Kira the ability to do summarization of extracted content. We weren't reimagining the whole engine on an LLM. It wasn't built from the ground up using generative AI and LLMs, but it's a product that people trust, that uses more classic versions of AI, that just added value by adding some basic summarization capabilities. And I think you will see those products still, people trust them. They do what they do really well still, and people will buy that at multi-year contracts. It's the brand new applications to market that are built from the ground up using LLMs and generative AI and all these fancy new buzzwords. Those applications, things that extract clause level information from documents. You see a lot of this type of application coming to market. There's a lot of them coming to market. My guess is not all of them survive. The devil's
Yeah,
going to be in the details on terms of who extracts those clauses best, and what data sources you can pull from, and these types of things. And it's those companies where you'll probably see 1 year, maybe 2 year deals. They're going to see the quality of the application, see what the uptick is at a particular firm, and maybe they'll
yeah,
keep it. Maybe they'll look to go to another vendor.
yeah. I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because everything is changing so quickly. But I think it's almost there's a I don't know about in the US, but almost not a throwaway mentality, but it's sort of because technology is relatively easy to lift and shift and sort of integrate into workflows. You sort of you don't want to disrupt the lawyer's world. So, or you sort of, if you're changing products every year, that's going to create some friction and some challenges. But ultimately, from a technology standpoint, it's relatively easy to do these days. So it's like, and that's the thing. Sort of, it's not throwaway mentality, but it's that kind of actually, it's not a 6 month change project. It's 2 weeks worth of tech stuff and then a bit of change, but then we've switched and it's easy. You know what I mean? And I think that's going to be that's the interoperability of technologies that are coming out now, and the ability to do that kind of stuff is going to be really telling on what can get swapped out, what doesn't, and everything else.
Yeah, look, I think it goes back to the data piece again to some aspect. You don't need to centralize all this data into a single repository. You don't need a data lake, arguably, anymore. These agents, these technologies can go and look at different data systems, and then kind of bring that data back to you as necessary. You don't have to centralize it all in one location. The agents, if that's the types of technology you're looking at, understand based on your natural language query or some button you've clicked on within the application, they know what data set to go and get that particular information from. So what potentially would have precluded, had made something super sticky in a law firm previously is because you spent all this time moving all this data into a centralized repository and tagging it with metadata and all of these types of things. Like that was a multi-year project to get it dialed in right. You should be able to, with the LLMs and the ability to extract and tag things more readily without moving data from some of the core systems, be able to potentially shift to different things more
Yeah,
quickly.
yeah. You just need a slightly different sort of infrastructure sort of set up, and the whole RAG pipeline and all the other bits and pieces so that you can point it at the right,
Exactly.
doing the right things. But sort of what the engine is that's doing it. I mean, our applied AI strategy is, I mean, we're a process engine, we're a process platform, we live in process. But what we've done is we've allowed our clients to connect into 60 different models and build the fabric and the framework to allow them to do that for different parts of their processing, different parts. So for this thing, they might use Claude. For this thing, they might use OpenAI. For this thing, they might use DeepSeek. They probably won't,
Mm.
but you can do all of those things and you can connect them. But actually, the plumbing that sits behind it, I think, is what's interesting is that the modality of a lot of what's out there at the moment is I'm somebody and I've got to do something, as opposed to there's a process. We know what that process is. This is
Mm.
the playbook. At this point, somebody would normally request for a summary of something. So why
Mm.
not just give them a summary of it? Why,
Yeah,
why, why, why,
agentic.
why wait for somebody to ask in a natural language, blah, 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 blah? Why not just go, actually, I know what they need to do, or I'm 99% sure this is what they might want next. Let's make it available to them. And so that's what's really interesting. We're talking to a lot of customers at the moment and prospects about sort of their existing processes and going, okay, well, what part of that is an agent as opposed to a chat interface to interact with these LLMs? And I think that's going to be a really interesting thing for us this year, which is, okay, well, actually at the moment, for the last 18 months, 2 years, people have been going, I would like to do this and I'm going to do that and go and get me this from over here.
Yep.
Whereas actually, programmatically, it's there. It's a standardized prompt. It's a standardized query. It's going off and doing using the infrastructure and the frameworks that you've already talked about. But actually, it's putting something in the hands of the lawyer at the point at which the checklist has said, or the playbook, or the
Yep.
process, whatever you call it, is saying, right, somebody needs a summary now, or someone needs 1,000 summaries. Maybe not, but that's going to be interesting as that plays out.
I look, I think that's where all this stuff goes in the next, it's probably not year, but you might see, people starting to talk about it, but in the next 3 to 5 years, matter centric agentic workflows is essentially what you're hitting on there. The ability to do multi-step reasoning within these applications. It is totally possible. ChatGPT, OpenAI just released their new operator model. It's exactly what it does. It handles multi-step workflows. They're gonna bring that model back into Microsoft as part of their Azure OpenAI stack, and all things will run wild from there.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. The ability to kind of daisy chain that stuff together is where the value is.
Yeah, 100%. Well, at least we're sort of 3 or 5 years ahead of the curve.
We're 3 to 5. I mean, again, like if you're not, I would encourage anybody to do exactly what we're doing. Just if find somebody who's very curious in the AI space and kind of keeps their pulse on reading what Microsoft is doing and other big tech vendors in the space that are creating reusable services for us to leverage, and just have conversations around it. Talk to your engineering teams or your vendors' engineering teams about what they're interested in and what they're kind of keeping an eye on, because this stuff's going to move quick. And people with that type of information will be super valuable.
Yeah. I was chatting to the other Ben from Autologics yesterday, and we were talking about sort of roadmap planning and everything else. And it's like, and he was coming up with he was sharing all these articles and information. I said, how do you keep abreast of all of this stuff and do your day job and do the things I also know that you do? And he goes, and at the moment he's super bright. He's like a mad scientist. You can throw him at a problem and he'll go and find a way of solving it. But ultimately, it's really hard because it's not like sort of when Kira came out or when something new came out, it was like, oh wow, there's a new thing and we can use that technology to do this. And then 4 or 5 or maybe 10 equivalents came out, the 2015, 2016. Sort of, it's like, it's now, there's too much. It's almost too much because everything is accessible and everything is flowing so quickly and rapidly changing. I mean, you look at what happened yesterday with the markets off the back of DeepSeek and everything else. It's like, you just think that has an impact beyond just the legal industry and sort of a little workflow that you're building. It's massive. But these things are impacting decisions and product roadmaps, and it's really hard for organizations like us and for you at both ends of the scale to pivot and go, how do we keep our BAU going and do these interesting things whilst everyone's doing, like, it's just madness at the moment. It's madness.
Yeah. Look, I think you need, again, this is where hopefully you're working with people who are kind of like thought leaders, directionally.
Smarter than me.
Yeah. Well, look, and it's never going to be
the baseline.
It's never going to just be one person. I do think, it's very rare to have a Steve Jobs types individual at any one company. Typically, this stuff comes from talking to customers and just seeing where some of the big technology vendors are putting their particular bets, and then you can kind of see. And you can see where the problems still exist and what problems are law firms going to want to solve for with this type of technology, and then try to start, tinker and see if you can get ahead of some of the curve here on this stuff. But but I think 2020, 2025 and 26 is going to be real interesting to see where all this stuff starts to settle, and we'll see how the models continue to get stronger. We'll see what Microsoft is doing. We'll see what OpenAI is doing. And that'll be quite telling. And, if you had to focus on any particular vendors to stay abreast on. Within the legal tech space, Microsoft's obviously a key player. I would definitely
Yeah,
follow them and see what services they continue to roll out, and how you could how and then talk to your vendors about how they're leveraging some of those services.
cool. That makes sense. Question, a couple of last questions because we're sort of running up on time, and I think one of the things that we've talked about is that kind of the balance between sort of scale up big corporates, the experience that you get. You've experienced, as we both discussed earlier, sort of the opportunities that you get from being inside of a bigger corporate or a growing organization. Um, what might be sort of, think back to your product days. What are the tips for people that are coming into legal tech product management at the moment, in terms of whether it just be sort of that deep sort of level research or a mentor or something like that? What are the things that, if you were starting out now, what would be the three or two things that you immediately try and think about? Okay, well, I need to do this, or I need to do that. I'm trying to think about a key takeaway for somebody.
Well, I mean, for me, it'll probably be come down to two things. One, I think if you're coming new into legal tech from a other vertical, I always encourage people to seek to understand before being understood. I do think just because you solve the problem a particular way in another industry doesn't mean it's right for legal. Legal we are big. It's a relationship business. They don't like change. So when that's going to be important when you're looking to build technology. Your technology better fit in an existing workflow, not break a workflow.
Yeah,
So I think that type of understanding comes from listening, and trying to understand the market first before saying, hey, here's all the new things we're going to do and we're going to pivot everything. The other piece is, the customers won't necessarily tell you exactly the right thing to buy, but they're going to outline problems that need to be solved with technologies. And, if you talk to enough customers, you'll start to see the picture getting painted, the themes emerging for where this stuff needs to go directionally, product by product, or more holistically. So I can't emphasize enough the importance of getting out, talk to other vendors, talk to customers, and just kind of that discovery mindset, that curiosity mindset, is beyond beneficial, particularly in this industry.
yeah. Okay, I mean, they sort of, again, maybe we're sort of intrinsic, because they would have been the two things that I would have sort of said as well. You know what I mean?
That's why we get
Because,
along so good.
oh, exactly. But this is it's a we're in a relationship business, really. The
Business.
industry that we're in, the communities that you build with sometimes competitors, sometimes partners, sometimes, and with your clients and prospects, you building this network of sort of knowledge, insight, expertise, and everyone's really open. So I think that's a massive, massive,
Yeah.
big part of it.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, no, it's super awesome. Matt, thank you very much for today. Really good to chat. Really interesting to hear
Likewise.
the journey, in terms of microsystems to today. I'm really loving sort of the direction of travel that you guys are now exploring around. You've always done it, but now you've got that dedicated function around sort of value and innovation, and sort of connecting the dots between sales and customer and product and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's really super important, particularly for an organization like you guys, where you've got multiple products, multiple divisions. Bringing all of that sort of knowledge and insight together is really key. I will see you at the next conference, no doubt. I'll be at the back
Absolutely.
heckling you, because you'll get wheeled out. You'll get wheeled out or something, and I'll just be in the background shouting.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, again, I appreciate the conversation today, and hopefully we can do it again soon.
Yeah, rock and roll. But keep well. I'll catch you very soon. Take it
You
easy.
too, sir. Thanks,
Cheers, mate.
man.
Bye.
Bye.